Hello. All right, so today we are going to transfer our patterns and do either our watercoloring or colored pencils. Too many words I can think. So I'm going to show you how to transfer, either transfer from paper or from like a digital pattern. I generally transfer on digital patterns, but I will show you how to do it from paper if you don't know how to do that. So are you ready? Let's do it. Okay. Let me move. I have just this pile of stuff. Okay. All right. Let me get you flipped around here. Okay. So I'm going to use my Kana Cotton. This is, I don't remember. It's one of the whites. I think it's the bone white. It's like just the tiniest bit off white. But that's what I'm going to use. And then we're going to do a test piece for our watercoloring. Okay. So, let me just get this ready. The first thing we're going to do is get our fabric in our hoops and transfer our pattern, and then we'll do our coloring. I'm just getting this small little 5-inch one ready first so that we can do some test watercolors on it first. Okay. So what we're going to do is I'm going to use an 8-inch hoop. So the pattern comes with 7-inch or 8-inch, depending on if you print it. If you're doing it digitally, it won't matter. But you could probably do this smaller, but with that many details, I just wanted to make sure we had plenty of space. So I'm going to use a bamboo hoop. I can't find my 8-inch plastic hoop, so I'm going to look for it again later, but I couldn't find it. So what we're going to do first is we're going to center our fabric in our hoop. Our inner hoop goes on the back, and then our fabric in between, and then our outer hoop on top. I loosened it too much. And then, oh, see, that's too loose. It's going to keep falling out. It's not even going to hold it. Okay, that is still really loose. It doesn't need to be super loose to put this in. Oh my goodness. Hold, please. My hoops are way too loose. It should be able to stay in there. Okay, now we're going to tighten it. So the thing with embroidery is you want to make sure that your fabric is like drum tight before you start stitching, because otherwise you're going to have issues with your fabric puckering and your stitches not laying as flat as they can. So after you get this finger tight, just work your way around your fabric and just pull that until it's drum tight. Mine is not drum tight yet. I usually do this a couple of times. So I forgot my screwdriver. Hold on. I always forget something. I nearly always use a screwdriver to tighten my hoops. I don't in my plastic hoops, but with regular hoops I do. So tighten that again and then pull this tight again. See, I can still pull quite a bit. Make sure you don't have like any, what's it called? Where it's like folded over on top of each other, like a pleat. Okay, so if you can't pull it anymore, that's awesome. I just like to do this twice, and I'll kind of hold this like up against my stomach and like pull this tight. So I'm like holding on to the inner hoop while I'm pulling this. So I'm holding it like this and pulling it at the same time. And then once it's drum tight, I kind of go around and push my outer hoop so that it's like on the inner hoop tightly. And then you can hear it's nice and snug. And then I just like to tighten this a little bit more, make sure it holds. And we have our fabric in our hoop. Now, I didn't center mine really well, which is fine. As long as you have about 1 inch on each side, I can come back and like trim. I'll trim this edge and stuff a little bit. But yeah, that is ready to go. Okay, so what we're gonna do first is get our pattern on here and then we will color it. So if you are using a paper pattern, this is how you're gonna do it. You can do it a couple different ways depending on the light in your house. So I like to just hold mine like this and draw my pattern. If that is not working for you, you can tape this to a window. The only thing is then it's easiest to, I like to stitch on this side. This is backwards, this is the inner hoop, but it's really easy to sketch it that way. Either on a table or up against a wall, or not a wall, a window, because then you've got the light shining through. So depending on the color of your fabric, that will make a difference. You could also use like a tablet as a light box, or use a light box if you have one. Put a light behind your paper and then put that on there. If you have a light box, you're more likely to be able to just put it like this and see it. I can't see the pattern. You can like barely, like if I push up against it, I can see it. But if you cut it in the circle, then you can put it inside your hoop. You'll be able to see that better. I find it easiest to cut it to size and then just push my fingers up against it and then draw wherever my finger is. I'll just move my finger along where I'm tracing my pattern. But that's one way, depending on what you have going on. This is a little bit bigger. I made this so that my daughter could color it as a coloring page. Okay. I didn't realize that my iPad was dying. I just barely plugged it in. So my cord is not long enough to reach. Okay. Now, if you are going to transfer from a screen, if you have an iPad, you can do guided access, which is what I'm going to do. I use Procreate. Hang on. Okay. So now your pattern will have two different options. It has this simplified pattern, and then it has the regular pattern with everything on it. I kind of did it that way because I wanted to be able to draw it this way, and then I'm planning on just freehanding the flowers. But I think it'll be easier to transfer the pattern this way first, even if you're going to draw on your flowers. Just so you can see the lines a little bit better, because this has a lot going on with all the flowers here, all the flowers here, all the flowers. There's just a lot of extra lines. So I just wanted to have it a little bit simpler if that would make it easier. So, all right, now what we're gonna do first is, I can make my pattern, bigger or smaller. So what I like to do is to put this on here. I need my screen to be brighter. I'm really worried about my iPad dying. Okay, so I'm gonna lay this on here. I'm gonna make it the size that I need it. Oh my gosh, hold on. Okay, so that's the size that I need it. And then when you have guided access on, if you go into your settings, you can turn on guided access, and you can, if I triple click the power button, it starts this guided access. So what you do is hit start, and then, hold on. Put in your code. So then when guided access is on, you can't move this. You can't make it smaller or bigger. You can't move it around on your screen. It just stays in this size. Now, usually I can see through it this way when my screen is bright enough, but I'm worried that my battery is gonna die. So my screen is not as bright as it could be. So I'm going to transfer it this way because I did not plan ahead very well. All right, so transferring, I'm gonna use a Pilot Frixion marker. Now, if you're going to watercolor and you're using a water-soluble marker, you might run into some problems. So I might recommend just outlining the building in pencil, doing your watercolor, and then coming back and adding your details. Just come in really, really light with a pencil, because if you draw with a water-soluble marker and then you do watercolor, you're gonna erase your lines. So keep that in mind. I'm just going to outline the building because I want to be able to watercolor with you guys, and I will not have time if I outline this entire thing. So I'll come back after my watercoloring is dry and add in the rest of the details. So even if I'm using like a heat erasable marker like I am, I still draw pretty light, just because I know there could be issues. These are not a perfect solution, but that's okay. Let me know if you have questions while I'm working on this. I can see your questions if you ask them, so feel free to ask them if I didn't answer something that you were wondering about. I'm not going to draw any of the books or anything. Oh man, my pattern got off a little bit. I know this is a hard way for some people because their line, I mean, I'm getting a little bit crazy. I'm a little bit more careful if I am not recording. I'm trying to be kind of fast. So take your time. Don't draw as fast as I am if you're having some struggles. My lines are not super straight, but I know I can fix that while I'm stitching, so I'm not super worried about it. Like, I'm not gonna do that hanging basket or the table and chairs. I will eventually. I'm gonna do the watercolor first. See, not straight. I have an easier time drawing straight if I'm going up and down versus horizontal, but even then, I'm just drawing fast. I'm also getting a little off-centered. I don't know. I think transferring from paper is a little, if you're going to struggle with, like, you can see that this line is like super crooked. If that's going to be a struggle for you, paper is probably a little bit easier because the screen is like slippery. I don't know. It doesn't bug me. I'm fine. Okay. Got our window. Those lines, man. Those are some crooked lines. The pattern is straight, my drawing is not. Okay. There we go. Okay. So that's what I'm going to watercolor. Now, I am not going to stitch this way because this is my inner hoop and that will drive me nuts. So what I'm going to do is take this out and flip my fabric over and then we'll watercolor. The only problem with doing this is that sometimes it won't be super straight because of how the fabric was stretched the first time. So that might be a little bit of an issue. I'm not super worried about that, but I know some people might be a little bit. Okay. So I'm just gonna stretch. Now, if I've already have my design on there, then I usually pull like top and bottom and then sides. See how I wanna make sure I pull it as straight as possible. So I generally do top, bottom, and sides first and then work my way around. And granted, my drawing was not super straight to begin with, but as much as I can, kind of try to keep that straight. Okay. There. Okay. So that is transferring our pattern. Now, if you're not planning to watercolor or colored pencil, you're done. You're ready to start stitching. We will do that next week. But if you're going to watercolor or colored pencil, let's chat about it. Now, if you're going to use a colored pencil, super easy, you're just gonna color. The darker or the harder you press, the darker it's gonna be, so you can keep it really light, you can get it really dark. I'm just holding my finger where I'm coloring and just coloring that in. These are just Crayola colored pencils. They're nothing special. This will fade a little bit as you're working on it. So kind of keep that in mind. These, if you do it really light, it's gonna get even lighter. If you do it dark, it's gonna get a little lighter as well. So kind of keep that in mind as you're coloring. Sorry, I'm shaking my table. So colored pencils. All right, now if you're going to watercolor, I would say practice on a separate piece of the same fabric that you're going to be doing your stitch along on so that you know how it's going to absorb water. Every fabric is going to be different. So if you've watercolored before and you're using a new fabric, you know, practice first. So I've got this big set of colors. I am going to use the brown. Here is my paint cup. Do you even have kids if you don't have a cup that looks like this? So I like to get my watercolor pretty wet. this is coming from somebody who does not watercolor. So if this is not the proper way, then please feel free to do it your own way. Okay, so I like to get it pretty wet and just do a test and see how dark it's gonna be. Okay, so it's pretty dark, pretty pigmented, quite a bit of water. So it does spread a little bit past this point. So I don't like to get too close to the edge. If you want it a little bit lighter, then you need to use more water. That's a little bit darker than what I want to go. So sometimes I'll also just bring some over to the side so that I can add more water to it. And then add some more water to it. So that's a little bit lighter than the first one. But can you see it's like starting to spread out a little bit on the edges? Like where it's wet, the color will push over there as well. So before you start painting on it's over there, on your bookshop, test it, let it dry and see what it does. But I can make this even less pigmented, just add some more water to it. All right, and then we'll do that. So that's even lighter. But it will spread a little bit more. So kind of keep that in mind. You don't want, like when you're painting, I would not recommend painting all the way to the edge with a really wet paintbrush. So if you want to like dry off your paintbrush a little and then kind of like smush it out a little bit. Like my paintbrush is fairly dry right now, but you can still see like that water is spreading a little bit. So kind of keep that in mind when you're, like my paintbrush is just a little bit wet. So I want to like bring this out a little bit. That'll lighten up my color as well. Or just don't let your watercolor be very wet. So like this is wet, but it's not super wet, not like this. And then when I paint, that water, there's not as much water, so it doesn't spread quite as much. After this dries, I'll post a picture of it in the stories and you can see what it looks like. Just getting a little bit of water, kind of even that out a little bit. Okay, but that will spread out a little bit. It already is a little bit right here, you can see. So I was gonna start painting on this. I want kind of a middle, not super dark, but not super light. So when I'm painting, I'm not gonna go all the way to the edge. I will just paint like this far out and then wait for it to dry and see how much it's gonna spread before I try and paint it and touch it up more. So it could take you a little bit of time, but on both sides, I'm gonna go not quite to the edge because I wanna be able to kind of control that a little bit. And I haven't done it enough to know where I'm like comfortable with my edge. So I am just gonna leave a bit of a gap. Because already I can see that water is seeping out here, which means that the paint will as well. And I'm using quite a bit of water, so if you use less water, it won't. Oh, we're gonna cover that up, it's okay. If I was using less water, it wouldn't spread quite that much, but. I'm gonna do a wood door as well. Now we're gonna stitch the awning, but if you want to watercolor it instead, you totally could, or colored pencil or whatever. This is a little bit more time consuming than other things, but I think it'll be worth it. Sometimes I feel like the water/paint is spreading too quickly. I'll hit it with an air dryer, but that can erase the pen lines too. Oh yeah, there you go. That's very possible. That's why I would use less water, not more water, at least to start with, until you're comfortable and can see how much it's gonna spread. Because like already down here, I can see that color like seeping into that water a little bit. And I know I'm gonna have to come back and touch this up. I just don't know how much. And so I would rather be a little bit more cautious. Now, if it goes out too far, that's okay. We'll just do our stitches out a little farther. Or if it seeps down into here, that's okay. We're gonna stitch over this anyways. Same with the pots. We're gonna stitch over the pots. The only thing I would be super, super careful of is the windows and the edge of the building. The rest of it, like, is not gonna be that big of a deal. Like if we have to stitch over some brown right here, it's not gonna be a big deal. So I'm gonna leave that for now and see how it dries. And then I'll come back in and touch this up. Maybe I'll do like a reel or something, just so there's something that you can like watch me a little bit, but that's too much water. I know some other people also will put water down first and kind of get that area wet and then come back with the watercolor or with the color. I am not as good at that. So then they get their, so that's a little bit wet and then come back with just some paint and then kind of fill it in. You could also use acrylic paints. I'm gonna be Miss Frizzle and I'm gonna say, make mistakes and get messy. Right? That's what she says. Okay. I'm gonna kind of leave that for now. I'll come back to it in a couple hours once it's dried and see how much like this water is seeping clear out to here. So I might have paint all the way out to there, which is, I'm not super worried about. Okay. Yeah, I've got water like clear out here. My paintbrush was really wet. Okay, so practice that. Practice on something smaller first and see what it does, because I think I'm always surprised how much my paint like goes into those wet spots. I probably should have done a little bit less on this, but that's okay. So do that. I will post pictures of this in my stories a little bit later so you can see it. And then let me know if you have questions. I'm excited to see what color your buildings are because I know not all of you are doing brown or blue. So can't wait to see them. If you tag me and your account is private, I won't see it. So if you want me to see it, maybe just send me a picture and I can share it with the group if you want me to. All right. Have a great afternoon and wait for some updates on me. See you later.